Well, shalom, shalom. Welcome, welcome, world changers. Here we are again, another evening. It's Shabbat Shalom. It's Shabbat Shalom. Erev Shabbat again. Another Friday. Here we are, Friday evening. These weeks seem to go by so incredibly fast. Anyways, hope you guys are having a great time wherever you are in the world. So once again, today I have a couple comments I'd like to respond to from YouTube this time, and I'll be interacting with you guys in the live chat as well, talking about humility, since this month I think it's a great idea to focus mainly on humility this month, as it says that God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. We want to have this grace of God. We want to experience his grace and power. Amen. Yeah, so we need to talk about humility. So I'm going to be talking about humility from the book of Job this time, and then, Lord willing, Hannah will come back and play a little bit more for us, and then we're going to get into Josephus a little bit later. So, hey, before I get too far as well, thank you, Hannah. That was beautiful, beautiful piece there that you played. Thank you very much again for blessing us with your talent. That is amazing. Beautiful, beautiful, Hannah. Thank you. Okay, so as always, I pray that everything that we talk about today would be a great blessing to you. Increase your knowledge of the scriptures, your knowledge of the things of heaven, your relationship with God, your knowledge of the truth. Amen, amen, amen. See what we have here in the live chat. We have Joseph says, Shabbat Shalom, family. Shabbat Shalom, Joseph. Welcome, welcome. Blessings to you, brother. Joseph says, piano in Yah's sunshine. Thank you, Sister Hannah. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, that's I never thought of it that way, but yes, I mean, right there right as the sunshine is beaming in, that's beautiful. Yes, and it was beautiful playing there, Hannah, and thank you, Joseph. Calamentos says, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom, Calamentos. Corey says, Shalom, Brother Christopher. I was reading the Bible last night, and it seems that when demons attack, every time I read or if I'm praying, I feel a negative presence or things happening around my room. Last night, I remembered closing my bedroom door, and I sat down to pray, and then I hear a squeak at my door, and it opened wide on its own. Everyone in my house was sleeping at the time. Not only, but I also had cups in the kitchen laying out to dry on the counter, and one of those glasses had been swept off the countertop and broke on the floor. Is my house haunted, or is it just me? Well, I don't know. Anything's possible here. What I would do, and I noticed here a little bit later on, Joshua said, Corey, is there something new you brought into the house, secondhand, or from someone or the thrift shop? There might be a demonic connection there. Yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point. When I read your comment there, that's the first thing that crossed my mind. Is like, if it is an evil spirit or evil spirits, if it is, then it could be a few things that I mean, evil spirits just don't, they really can't, they don't really have the right just to come in and wreak havoc on you unless you are unless they have legal ground, so to speak. You have to have legal ground to do so. In other words, it's either something in your house, in your home, wherever it is, whether it's a house or a home or an apartment or whatever, something, and it could be something like Joshua said. It could be something as innocent as just something that a secondhand thing that you bought that perhaps has something connected to it. It could be something like that, or it could be perhaps something that you did that invited them in without you really knowing. That is a possibility as well. What I would highly recommend is go through everything in your house go through everything and throw out anything, destroy anything, throw it out that would be against God's ways. Like, for example, I don't know, Corey, if you have anything, like if there's any kind of occultic books or any kind of occultic paraphernalia, if you will, around the home, anything to do with the occult, just get rid of it. There is a particular gentleman, by the way, that Lord willing, I'm going to have him on as a live guest, and it may be within the next few weeks. There is a gentleman who he was doing what he shouldn't have been doing way back in the day. Well, it was a while ago now, but he was with a whole bunch of friends. I think it was like in a garage or something, and they had the Ouija board out, and they were doing the Ouija board. And what happened was, talk about a glass. It had something to do with a wine glass or something like that. Just like poltergeist stuff, like just flew across the room. Nobody threw it. Nobody touched it. You know, in that sense, nobody did it. Nobody threw it, but it flew across the room and broke. And why would that happen? I do believe that that those kind of things happen, and they are real. A lot of people that claim to have poltergeist activity, a lot of it's not real. I don't think a lot of it's not real. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that all of it is fake or intentionally a hoax, although perhaps some of it is. But I know that there are. I have experienced myself things in my darker days, if you will, that completely. There's no way I could ever deny that a spirit could do this. I mean, it's my own experience. I have personally had an evil spirit push me up against the wall. I know that sounds weird. I know that sounds strange, but that's what. Well, it kind of pushed me out of the way. Pushed me out of the way, and I knew the spirit pushed me out of the way and went back. So, these spirits usually they have to have some kind of legal right there. Something. If it's an object, it could be an innocent object that it has like that a spirit is kind of attached to. It could be a not so innocent object, as we were talking about before, like something like a Ouija board or any kind of occultic books, videos, any kind of paraphernalia like that. Anything like that. Any kind of spiritualistic stuff or anything that's against the Torah, I would do that. I would go through the house. My own personal testimony, a little sliver of it, is when I first really started walking with God, when I first really repented, I had nightmares every single night, and I cleaned house. I went through almost everything you can ever. I went through everything, and threw out whatever I could throw out, burned actually whatever I could burn, like a bonfire, and destroyed whatever else I couldn't burn. And from that day forward, the nightmares stopped. So, yeah, this stuff is real. This stuff is real. Those are my thoughts, Corey. The Lord guide you and lead you in the matter. Thank you very much. Big Boss. Welcome, Big Boss. We have Big Boss in the house tonight. Joshua says, Shalom, Shalom, Joshua. Welcome, brother. Good to see you. Yeah, Joshua says, I never really thought demons and evil spirits were being much of a real thing until I read the book of Enoch. I was like, wow, a tenth of the offspring of the fallen watcher angels doing Satan's bid. Yeah, it's an amazing book, isn't it? Seek the Lord says shalom. Shalom, seek the Lord. Blessings. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, so got a couple comments here. Yeah, this is what the Book of Enoch says, Joshua. Souls of the disembodied, half angel, half human children of the watchers wreaking havoc on mankind. Yes. Yes. And they're good at it, aren't they? They're really good at it, aren't they? I mean, they're good at deceiving. And a lot of people are deceived. It reminds me of in the book of Revelation where it says that Satan deceived the whole world. Like, I don't think it literally means every single, right down to every single person, but I think it's pretty close to it, in a way. It's pretty good at what he does in that sense, that's for sure. So, first comment I'd like to read here is a comment that was left on a video, and this is an old video actually. I reposted this old video. It's an old video that was reposted called "The Doctrine of Original Sin is a Lie," and this is a multi-part series of talking about original sin. I go through a fair amount of it, and this is part 5 of a multi. I forget exactly how many parts it was now. It's like I said, it's an old video. So this is the thing, like, when I get a comment like this, I have to wonder. So the video is "The Doctrine of Original Sin is a Lie," and we have a Wade Evans that says, "I'm not sure you understand the doctrine of original sin correctly. I'm not going to sit here and bash on you or anything, but those verses don't cover original sin." Okay, well, I mean, couple things here. Hey, maybe, there is some things about the doctrine of original sin that perhaps I've never heard before. I mean, I've been in church circles and heard about it for some 30 plus years, and have pastored churches and planted churches and been church leader in various churches. So I do have a little bit of exposure to the doctrine of original sin. That's number one. Number two, I'm not sure, Mr. Evans, if you actually saw there is a thing that says part 5 on the video. Okay, right in the corner it says part 5. Okay, so that means there are more parts to the series, and so perhaps you didn't watch all the parts. So you're thinking that I'm trying to cut that this one little clip of less than a minute of video footage. You think that I'm trying to go through the entire doctrine of original sin, or cover all the verses that it deals with. Not sure where you're coming from, but those are my 2 cents on it. Thank you very much, Wade Evans, for the comment. Melody says, Shabbat Shalom to all. Shabbat Shalom, Melody. Welcome, blessings to you. Billy says, Shalom. Shalom, Billy. Welcome and blessings. Corey says, I did once have a neighbor whose elevator didn't reach the top, figure of speech. And he always did a thing where he would try to make a barrier with salt around the outside of his door. He also had portraits of Jesus Christ all around his house. Yeah, I don't know. Would I be right, Corey, in thinking that you're thinking that perhaps it has something to do with this neighbor? Perhaps there's some kind of spiritual power or some kind of spiritual force there that your neighbor is responsible for. Is that what you're thinking? Yeah. So here is another comment. And this is talking about again how the devil deceives people. The devil's pretty good at deceiving people, especially if you're on the wrong side of God. And sometimes God just hands people over to deception, like he delivered them up to lying spirits, delivered them up to a depraved mind, so to speak. So when God does that, the devil comes in and can wreak havoc for sure. Keep in mind, and even the devil can't really do anything past what God allows him to do, or the boundaries that God put in place. Now we'll read that a little bit later here in just a few minutes in the book of Job. So the devil is there basically. I mean, when the devil comes in, or any of his evil spirits come, it's usually, perhaps always, because they have legal right to do so, or he has legal right to do so. So again, let's say, for example, if you, God forbid, engage in seriously against God, against his word, and that's against his law. So what happens is, when a person does that, in the spiritual realm, we have God, we have Satan, we have the watchers, so to speak, the witnesses. We have the evil spirits and the good spirits, the evil angels and the good angels. And when someone engages in something like that that's blatantly against the Torah, what happens is God can say, look, okay, basically signing the deed of your perhaps your possessions, perhaps your body, perhaps your spirit, perhaps your soul, over to an evil spirit or evil spirits, or to the devil. Because in breaking the Torah, a person gives legal right for evil spirits and the devil to do these things. So they do it legally. They invade a person's body, sometimes house, home, whatever, legally, because of something that is there, or something that somebody did that gave them legal right to do that. But anyways, yeah, evil spirits are very deceptive, and the devil is a deceiver, and he's very good at what he does. So I have a video talking about that, and Carl Ward says I guess this would be speaking about Satan, has convinced most of the world that either Yahweh doesn't exist, or that you're saved by, quote, faith alone, unquote, and that your way of living bears no weight on your salvation, which the Old Testament and Jesus say the opposite. That's awesome. That's awesome, Carl. That's awesome. An awesome comment there. Thank you for sharing. Yes, Joshua, you got, I think about how, I believe it talks about how Lot was vexed with the culture that he lived in there at that point in time. It is very vexing, for sure, according to the Holy Scriptures, and anyone who is seriously following God and the Scriptures. Very, very vexing it is. Or he says, I think there could be things leading up to the issue. Never been in his house, but he maybe had something that he was spiritually bound to. Yeah, sounds like you probably did. The way you describe it, for sure. Talking about deception, the next comment here deals with another video that that I posted not too long ago. A little clip out of a live stream, and in this little clip, it's called "Reincarnation." Little children remember past lives. So this is one of the points that people make when it comes to reincarnation. It's like, well, little children, remember past lives. Well, I think that's a fallacy, because you have, evil spirits can affect little children too. You have people of all different sinful things that they engaged in. Even have people that are very evil people, and they say that they've had these inclinations ever since they were children. Like, just for example, this is one example out of many. This is one example out of many. Like someone who's like very abusive to animals, for example. I've heard it said, well, ever since they were a little child, they were, so it's like it was like in them since from childhood. So the point is that just because a person is a child, just because we have a child, doesn't necessarily mean that there's no evil forces at work there. And when you have an evil spirit that has right, now you say, how could an evil spirit have right to a child? Well, there could be many ways. Perhaps there are things in the home that welcome these evil spirits in. Perhaps the parents are involved in these kind of things that are very anti-Torah things, against the ways and the will of God, and doing things that would allow spirits in. And a lot of times parents actually kind of impose this evil way of thinking upon their children as well. Now, when I say evil way of thinking, I'm just talking about thinking in a way that's against the Torah. So, yeah, it's possible that an evil spirit can affect a child as well, for sure. So someone would say, well, excuse me, so it's like, well, but these are not an evil spirit. This is not an evil spirit talking to me. These are my thoughts. This is not the thought, this is not an evil spirit. These are my thoughts. I had somebody say that to me back when I did a live stream about reincarnation. It's like, no, it's not, it's not an evil spirit telling me this. These are my thoughts. See, when a person says that, they don't understand the operation, how an evil spirit operates. An evil spirit can entangle themselves in your soul, so integrated in your soul that you think it's yourself. Like, a lot of wicked thoughts people have are thoughts that originate or come from evil spirits, but they think that it's their thoughts. It's like, I thought this up. Well, not. It could be an evil spirit that is imposing this on you. And if a person has an evil spirit, that can almost become like one with you, so that it's like you cannot discern between the thoughts of this spirit and your thoughts. It's like, it's my thoughts, not the spirit's thoughts. Well, don't you understand? Like, anybody who says that, they don't understand how evil spirits work. An evil spirit can actually integrate itself or themselves into a person's spirit or soul so intricately that it's like you don't even know the difference between this spirit and yourself. So anyways, yes, on this video, I explain all that thing, explain those kind of those concepts, and we have T4C0 underscore ED1T5 says, well said. Well said. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the comment. Oh, sorry about that. Melody says, I read a book quite a while ago about superstitions. Some people believe that salt has magical powers and will keep evil away or keep evil things from happening to them. An evil spirit can influence and even control a person's mind and thoughts. Yeah. Yes. And this is the point, right? Like a lot of people, they have an evil spirit that's controlling their thoughts, but they don't realize it. They think it's their thoughts, not the spirit's thoughts. I mean, this is not an evil spirit. This is my thoughts. You know, we had a person say that on that that video about reincarnation there a few weeks ago. Joseph says, true, Sister Melody. Yeah, this is an interesting thing as well. You know, this is an interesting point because, you know, some people, they think that just because a certain item is used in the worship of another's god, if you will, or evil spirit or something like that, they think that just because an item is used in that sense, that particular item is evil. It can be, and many times it is, but sometimes it's not either. Like, you know, like this is a good example. Salt, we need salt to live. Okay, we need salt to live. You don't have salt, then you're going to end up dying without salt if you don't have any salt whatsoever. So even though it's used in a way that is not good, it doesn't mean that it in itself is bad. Corey says, this same neighbor approached me one day and asked me if I do black magic. I replied that I don't. You're a Christian. Well, yeah, it sounds like this particular person is involved in this kind of thing, which would definitely bring these kind of spirits. Especially, Corey, if you're living like in an apartment building and this person's like right next door or something like that. Not sure where you live, if it's a detached house or not. Regardless, you could break, like if this person, you know, cursed or sent a spirit to you or to your house or gave you something. Here's another thing. Here's something like trying to remember if this neighbor has ever given you anything. I mean, this neighbor can curse a particular object and give it to you. And spirits can be attached, so to speak, to an object. So if that neighbor gave you anything, I would get rid of it. I would get rid of it. Yes, yes. Billy talks about free will to choose. Yes, 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 yes. We have a choice. That's for sure. All right, guys. Let's go on over to the Book of Job. Book of Job, and we'll talk about this. So this particular month, we are going to be focusing on humility. Humility. The humility month. Corey says this same man was diagnosed with schizophrenia He didn't give me anything, but there was a point that he approached my dog with a rifle. And it just could be in this case. Now, I'm not saying that every case, but the way what you've told us so far, Corey, it makes me really lean to the point of saying that if this person has schizophrenia, it could very well be because of this kind of spiritual practice that he's doing. Okay, Book of Job, talking about the whole concept of humility. Super, super important. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Every believer that I know of wants the grace of God. They claim the grace of God. But a lot of these so-called believers are proud. They have pride. They have arrogance. They're not very humble. So how can you claim the grace of God when you don't have humility? Because according to the scriptures, humility is the prerequisite. It is mandatory to have humility. You must have humility. God gives grace to those who are humble. All right, so going over to Job chapter 1. Job chapter 1. Now, I'm not going to read a whole lot of Job. The first chapter, last chapter at least, maybe skim over a few other ones. But this is one thing I'll never forget. Back in the day, I still have it, actually. I still have it. It's way back in the day in 1992 when I first started seriously walking with God. I went to the local Christian bookstore and purchased a Bible on cassette, a whole volume. Like it was four times, what would it be now? 12? 48 cassettes, an hour and a half each of just, it's an audio book. It's an audio Bible. And I listened to the Bible so many times through those cassettes. I'd put the cassette on and listen to it, doing whatever. I'd be everything that I did. I would listening to. Sometimes I would just go out and just back in those days you have a Walkman, right, with a cassette, and so nowadays you have the cell phones and earbuds and such. But back in those days you had like a Walkman with headphones. So I would go out and listen to the Bible while I was going about doing my daily things, and just sometimes just going on a leisure ride or leisure stroll, and just listening to the Bible everywhere. I believe it was 1992, if not it was shortly thereafter. There is a cassette in that series. I still got it, not too far. I can get this cassette actually. It is a cassette that has the entire book of Job on one cassette. It's an hour and a half cassette. The entire book of Job is on that. So I listened to the entire book of Job in one sitting without stopping it. Just put it on and tune in, focus in on it, listen to the entire book of Job from beginning to end. And when I did that, it really just opened up my understanding to the book of Job in a way that never happened before. Because I read through the book of Job. I don't know how many times I read the book of Job, read all kinds of different passages in the book of Job. But when I sat down and I read through, or listened, I should say, listened to the audio book of the book of Job all the way through from beginning to end, it's like it all came into focus, and it all came into context. And so one of the things that really stuck out to me is that the book of Job is really all about humility. I know Job is known for his patience and his suffering and so on and so forth. But really, at the end of the day, when you go through the entire book of Job in one sitting, and you back up, like, a little bit from the scene, you back up from the picture, so to speak, and you look at it from a distance, it's like, see the whole picture, like you see what the moral of the story is. Job he had an issue of pride. Yeah, he was blameless. Yes, he was a good man. Yes, he was godly. But he had this issue of pride that needed to be dealt with in order for him to be a better man. And God did what he did to do that, to fulfill that in Job's life. God sent Satan to Job basically to teach him this lesson of humility. It's an awesome story. It's a wonderful story. And it just really, really opened my mind, my understanding to the book of Job in doing that. So once again, I'm not going to go over all of the book of Job, just a little bit here and there. But I encourage you, if you can listen to the audiobook, listen to the book of Job in an audiobook form in one sitting, it's awesome. It's just really, really awesome. Maybe I should do that sometime. Maybe I should record myself actually reading the book of Job, put it up on YouTube, and for everyone to benefit from. All right, so the book of Job, chapter 1. It says, verse 1, there was a man in the country of Uz named Job. Keep in mind, some people believe that this Job is the same as Jobab in other portions of the scripture. Let's say if you look at Jobab. Okay, so that would be in Genesis chapter... Well, we got a few different Jobabs here. So one is Genesis chapter 10, verse 29. I believe this would be the one that they believe that this is actually Job. Because many scholars believe that Job lived around the time of Abraham. So Genesis chapter 10 would actually, Abraham comes in, Genesis chapter 11, I think it is. No, Genesis chapter 11 is the Tower of Babel. Shem's descendants, no, Genesis chapter 12. Yeah, Abram, yeah. So Job and Jobab could be the same person. Just saying. Job and Jobab could be the same person. There was a man in the country of Uz named Job. He was a man of complete integrity, who feared God and turned away from evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. His estate included 7,000 sheep and goats, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large number of servants. Job was the greatest man among all the people of the East. Wow. Job was the greatest man among all the people of the East. What an amazing statement that is. Can you imagine? Verse 4, his sons used to take turns having banquets at their homes. Sounds like they were very rich. Sounds like they were very wealthy. They would send an invitation to their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. Whenever a round of banqueting was over, Job would send for his children and purify them, rising early in the morning to offer burnt offerings for all of them. There's a footnote here. Footnote. Okay, so it says literally for the number of them. For the number of them. Job thought, perhaps my children have sinned, having cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular practice. So it sounds like Job, so he was a rich man, and his children were very blessed, very they lived very luxuriously. And I think it's because of that. It seems like it's because of that kind of lifestyle that Job was kind of like, well, I hope my children haven't sinned against God. So he would offer burnt offerings for all of them. So here's an amazing piece of evidence as well. Since Job is the oldest book in the Bible, Job existed before Moses, and if Job lived around the time of Abraham, like some scholars believe, then this would prove that the Torah existed long before Moses came on the scene. And not only did the Torah exist, but people knew about the Torah. You'd say, well, how could you say, where do you get that from? How do you figure? Well, because it talks about sin and righteousness here, just in the first few verses. It talks about sin and righteousness. How do you know about sin and righteousness without the Torah? Right? Even Paul, I think that this is good. I mean, I think it's true what Paul said here is that you don't know what sin is except by the law. There's no way to know what is right or what's wrong unless you have a law. Job had a law, the law of God, okay? Because he knew what God wanted and what God did not want. He knew what was sin against God. He knew what it meant to live righteous before God. And it could just be that the reason why he was so prestigious and so well known, and he was the greatest man in all the East, and he was so wealthy, is because he lived by the Torah. And so all the blessings of the Torah came upon him. Look at him. I mean, he had so much. He owned so much. He had an amazing big family, lots of assets. I mean, he was a great man. And probably because, I don't think it just happened. I don't think he just one day just, woke up and won the lottery or something. Roll the dice and see who's going to be the richest man today. No. I think that Job was blessed of God because of his obedience. But as we read some of this, again, I'm not going to read a whole lot, just a little bit of the beginning, a little bit of the end, but I recommend that every one of you, if you haven't already, read through the book of Job or listen to an audio book of the book of Job. And, it's just an amazing account. And it says this was Job's regular practice. So he would always offer burnt offerings. So how would he know about burnt offerings too? It's not just the idea of knowing sin from righteousness and what is sin, what's righteousness, but it's also knowing how to worship God, the sacrificial system, how to sacrifice, what are burnt offerings. How would you know about burnt offerings unless it was the Torah that told you, or by the Torah? Because you'd have to know how to do it, what animals would God accept, what animals would God reject, where to do it, and all these kind of, all those details. So, verse 6 comes around. One day the sons of God, now this phrase, sons of God, is an interesting phrase because this is talking about the angels, the sons of God, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. It says in the book of Revelation that Satan is before the throne of God, accusing the brethren day and night. So he is praying. Satan's praying day and night, according to the book of Revelation. It seems like Satan prays more than Christians do. It seems like Satan prays more than Christians do. So we have the angels of God coming before before God here, as it would be before the throne of God, and Satan also came with them. And out of all of the crowd, you got the angels of God, and then you have Satan. Verse 7, the Lord asked Satan, "Where have you come from?" "From roaming through the earth," Satan answered him, "and walking around on it." So no, it is not living in hell. No, it's not living in hell. Roaming the earth, roaming throughout the earth, going to and fro throughout the earth, as it says in a different translation. Verse 3, then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? So right away, it was the Lord who pointed Job out to Satan. Satan just couldn't go and attack Job. That's not how it works. Satan just doesn't go and attack Job just like that. He didn't. And obviously, Satan knew Job. He knew about him. Okay? How do we know that Satan knew about Job? Because when we read on here, when God asked Satan, have you considered my servant Job? Satan he did not say, Job? Who's Job? No, he didn't say that. He knew Job, but he did not attack him. It was God who sent Satan to Job, just like it was God that sent an evil spirit to King Saul. Think about that. An evil spirit from God, it says in the scriptures, went and afflicted Saul, King Saul. In the same way, we have Satan. For lack of a better way of putting it, you can say, from God. Satan came, sent from God, more or less, to attack Job. Say, why would God do that? It says Job was a righteous man. He was full of integrity. He obeyed the law. He did the burnt offerings. He worshiped God. He feared God. All of these things. He was doing everything he can possibly do to try to make sure that his children were living the right way, and he was concerned about perhaps his children might have engaged in some kind of sin and in all of the pleasures that they indulge in. So what did Job do? What did Job do that would cause God to basically sick Satan on him? We'll read about that a little bit later, because it becomes really clear a little bit later as to exactly what Job did. Now, it doesn't tell us here, does it? It doesn't tell us exactly why God was like, Satan, have you considered Job? Like, go get Job, kind of, pretty much is what it's like. So the Lord continues talking to Satan, saying, no one else on earth is like him, a man of perfect integrity who fears God and turns away from evil. There you go. Can you imagine even God saying that about you? Can you imagine? Verse 9. Satan answered the Lord, does Job fear God for nothing? Haven't you placed a hedge around him, his household, and everything he owns? You have blessed the work of his hands and his possessions and have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he owns, and he will surely curse you to your face. Very well, the Lord told Satan, everything he owns is in your power. Imagine that. Can you imagine Satan saying, you know what? God just gave me everything that Job owns. Everything that Job owns is now in my power. That's an amazing thought, isn't it? So, God says, however, do not lay a hand on Job himself. So Satan left the Lord's presence. Yeah, so Satan's like, okay. I just caught this out of the corner of my eye. Billy says, as a married man, may I point out that Satan wanted to torture Job So he took his property, his children, his animals, but left him his wife. Well, you know, this is a good one too, Billy. Yeah, I was just about going to say this. In defense of marriage, I've heard that the two were one flesh, so Satan couldn't touch her either. Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. That's a point. Good point right there. So when God said to Satan, "You can have everything that he owns, just don't lay a hand on Job himself," that would include his wife, because she is one with him. She's one flesh with him. So she is basically him. You know, we mentioned this there several nights ago when we had Ezekiel ask a question about Genesis. Was it chapter 1, verse 17, if my memory serves me correctly, talking about God created man, and in male and female he created them in his own image. So in that verse as well, we have Eve included in that phrase, ha-adam, or the man. The man included Eve. So you got a lot of people today that are offended because it's like, oh, you don't just say the man, say, because that's not inclusive. Well, yes, it is inclusive. It's very inclusive. When you say the man, you're talking about the woman too. You're talking about the woman too. Now again, let's take a peek over there, because this is a good example. I hope my memory serves me correctly here. It wasn't Genesis 1:17, it was Genesis 1:27. One digit off. So Genesis 1:27, it says, "So God created man in his own image." So for those of you who want to take the word man out of everything and just replace it with something neutral, keep in mind that word includes it includes women too, because it says here, God created man in his own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them, male and female. So man, Adam, in the Hebrew, means in this context both male and female. Both male and female. Yeah, so when God said, "Don't touch Job," it also included the female. It also included his wife. Or he says, what I don't understand is the rich man was told by Jesus to rid of all his possessions and then he'd be forgiven. Why was Job favored and he did the same thing? Well, no, he didn't do the same thing. That's the reason why. So if you go there, it wasn't told to rid of his possessions. Okay, is something a whole lot more than that. Mark 10:21. Give me a second here. Mark 10:21. Looking at him, Jesus loved him and said to him, this is Jesus talking to the rich man. A little bit more context here. So Mark 10:17, as he, that would be Jesus, let's just give it a little pretty it up a little bit here with the red letters. Mark 10:17, as he, that would have been Jesus, was setting out on a journey, a man ran up, knelt down before him, and asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" So it's not necessarily so this is about what must I do to live, okay? So yes, forgiveness would be involved in that, but it would be the whole idea of this is salvation. This is where you inherit eternal life. And so Jesus, right away, he said, "Why do you call me good?" Jesus asked him. "No one is good except God alone." So I know a lot of people who are very strictly Trinitarians would have a problem with that. They would say, "Well, look at Jesus is, Jesus isn't saying that he's not God." This is what they say, right? This is how they put it. Jesus isn't. This is how they beat around the bush, or this is how they make it work. They force a square peg in a round hole. They say Jesus didn't say that he's not God. He said that he is God, because he's like, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone." In other words, he was saying, "Look, you call me good, and you call me good. That's only God alone is good." Wink, wink. Hint, hint. But that's not how it was put, was it? Like, if you can think, like, let's say today, if you were to go up to a pastor and say, "Good, you're a really good pastor. Good pastor. Let me ask you a question." And the pastor, if the pastor says, "No, why do you call me good? There's only one that's good, that's God." Now, who in their right mind would think that pastor is calling himself God if he were to reply like that? Who in their right mind would interpret that, would understand that response to mean that the pastor thinks that he's God, or that the pastor's preaching that he's God? To me, it's the opposite. Anyways, that's a little bit of a rabbit trail. Mark 10:19. So Jesus, in answering his question, how do I inherit eternal life? He says, the commandments, of course. Well, so this is good. I mean, Jesus is doing exactly what he should be doing as an Orthodox Jewish rabbi. You want to get saved? Obey the commandments. The commandments. And he rattled off a few here. Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't bear false witness, don't defraud, honor your father and your mother. And then the rich ruler says, "Teacher, I have kept all these from my youth." Looking at him, Jesus loved him and said to him, "You lack one thing. Go, sell all you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." Now, in other manuscripts, it says, "Taking up the cross and follow me." Take up your cross and follow me. Because the cross is a symbol of ultimate sacrifice. So I think that the reason why Jesus said this is because he realized that there was something wrong here. Yes, so those commandments, those few commandments that he rattled off, the rich young ruler, he obeyed them. He passed, check. Oh, wait a second. There's a box here that's not checked. This is the box of idolatry. So the rich young ruler had his wealth was his idol. It was his God. He trusted in his wealth more than he trusted in God. So there is where he lacked. That's why Jesus is like, "Oh, look you lack one thing here. Stop trusting in your wealth. Don't worship mammon anymore. Sell what you have and give to the poor." Why would he say sell what you have and give to the poor? Because it wasn't about just getting rid of your possessions. That's not what it was about. It was about actually taking what you have and giving it to the poor, which is actually a Torah commandment. To give to the poor is a commandment of the Torah. So what Jesus was saying here is like, okay, so check. Okay, you got all these commandments, but when it comes to giving to the poor, you missed that one there, rich young ruler. There's where you lack. giving to the poor. It was about the commandment to give of your resources to those who are poor. And then Mark 10:22, the next verse, it says, "But he was dismayed by this demand, and he went away grieving because he had many possessions." So the question here is, like, what I don't understand is the rich man was told by Jesus to rid all of his possessions. That's only a part of what was going on there. He was told to give to the poor. That's where it's all at. That's where the Torah command comes in. That's where he was lacking. That's the thing. And he'd be forgiven. He'd be forgiven because he would repent of his idolatry in not trusting in God as he should. And he would repent of his not obeying that command to help the poor. So it's like at least two different sins they're repenting of. And that's why he would be forgiven, because repentance always brings forgiveness. Now, so why was Job favored when he did the same thing? Well, because he didn't do the same thing. He didn't sell what he had and give to the poor. I think that he probably already was giving to the poor indirectly anyway, because of his wealth. His wealth would definitely funnel down into his children, and his children was holding all these magnificent, eloquent banquets all the time. And so people that were poor would come to these banquets, I'm sure, and avail themselves of this wonderful food. Job's problem wasn't really that. Job's problem was his pride. And we'll see that a little bit later on. Thank you, Corey. Joshua says, how interesting. Job was able to offer his own burnt sacrifices, pre-Levitical priesthood, and Saul was rebuked for doing so. The Torah being forever settled in heaven, why was it okay for Job? Another great question, and not for Saul. See, now, okay, so let's go back there. So, as I understand it, it doesn't say that he did it as only him, like by himself. Okay, let's just go back there. Okay, see if we can find, okay, right here in verse 5. Whenever a round of banqueting was over, Job would send for his children and purify them, rising early in the morning to offer burnt offerings for all of them. Okay, so here's the thing. So does this say that Job did it all by himself? See, it could have been that he did it, that he took any given animals or whatever sacrifices or offerings that he would have to the appropriate place, to the appropriate person. For example, we have Abraham and Melchizedek. Melchizedek was a priest, right? And so according to, now again, Genesis being Genesis, it's not very informative as to who Melchizedek really is. Christians say that Melchizedek is like a pre-incarnate Christ. Other people say that he was an angel. Other people will say, other things. But according to Jewish tradition and the oral, I guess you would say the Midrash, and Jewish scholars and sages, if you were to check it out, Melchizedek was believed to have been Shem, as in Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the son of Noah. So Shem being the king of Jerusalem back in those days would also carry the name Melchizedek. Now, if he was the king of Jerusalem, and if Shem was, Shem like that, he would have had the authority. If he was a high priest, he would have had the authority to make the offerings himself, or to do the priestly service as a Levite would have in the future. It doesn't really tell us much here in Job chapter 1 verse 5. It could be saying that Job took his animals to Jerusalem for burnt offerings, to offer burnt offerings. For example, so in Acts chapter 21, it talks about Paul and the 4 other men who he sponsored for the Nazirite vow. It said that they, were to go up to offer their offerings. Now, it doesn't mean that they did it by themselves, right? It just means that they took their offerings to the temple, to the right person, to the proper person, at the proper place, at the proper time. So, in that same way, it could mean the same thing here in Job chapter 1 verse 5. It could mean that Job took his offerings to the appropriate person at the appropriate spot. Okay, so yeah, so that's my take on it. That would be my take on it. Yeah, very good question. Oh yeah, Joshua says what God said about Job, certainly a big stickler to that. No one is righteous, no, not one. Yeah, that is true. Very, very true. Same with Noah. Noah's a good one too. Noah, Genesis 6:9 and 7:1 says that Noah was a righteous man. Clearly, plainly says Noah was righteous. It says Noah was righteous in Genesis 6:9, and then it says Noah was righteous before God in Genesis 7:1. Yeah, in regards to Job's wife, Joshua is asking a question here about Job's wife. If she was punished for what she said about curse God and die. It doesn't say that she was, right? It doesn't say that she was punished. It makes me think about what would have happened if Adam did what Job did. Basically ignored Eve's temptation. Right? So it was Satan that tempted Eve, and then Eve basically tempted Adam. So Adam fell to Eve, basically. But what would have happened if Adam did what Job did? What would have happened if Adam said, nope, no way? It could have been the same kind of outcome. It could have been that that Eve would not be punished. Because again, Adam, being the man, would have possible. I'm just thinking out loud here. It could have been. It would be possible for Adam to be, because of his authority as the man, if he did not fall to the temptation, then perhaps Eve would not be punished either, because they're one, right? His decision, his rejection, or his what do you call that? When you're tempted, you resist. His resistance to the temptation could have nullified Eve's sin. Because he says no, Eve could have been basically cleansed at that point in time. I'm just thinking out loud. Another excellent question. Yeah, demons refer to themselves as they, them. I think about that too. I think about that. We are many. Legion. Ophies says shalom. Shalom, Ophies. Welcome, welcome. Melody says a lot of people think that the verse about the rich young ruler means that money is evil, and that as believers we should not have it. Yeah. So that's a good point. I don't think that would fly in the face of, like Abraham, very wealthy, Solomon, very wealthy. It was actually wealth given by God. So I don't think that would really. I don't think that would jive with the idea that God gives people wealth, as he did and still does. It's just basically what you do with it. Like you mentioned earlier about salt, right? About how it's like this kind of like strange superstitious thing to use salt to ward off evil spirits. But hey, salt in and of itself there's nothing wrong with it. It's what I guess is what you do with it, if you use it in that way. So in the same way, it's like money in and of itself is not evil. It's how you manage it, or how you look, what you do with it, especially in your heart. Corey says, did you read my comment on one of your short vids yesterday, Brother Chris? I think I did. I quickly ran through some of the comments there earlier. If there's a question, Corey, that you would like me to address, if you don't mind, please repost it here, and then we'll get to that. Yeah, Melody says, money is not evil. It's the love of money that causes people to do bad things. Yeah, it's definitely one way that God blesses people, that's for sure. So, yeah, thank you very much. Now, where do we leave off? Sorry about the hyper scrolling here. Job chapter 1, verse 13. One day when Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their older brother's house, a messenger came to Job and reported, while the oxen were plowing and the donkeys grazing nearby, the Sabaeans swooped down and took them away. They struck down the servants with the sword, and I alone escaped to tell you. So what happened here? Satan, that's what happened. So Satan can use human beings to fulfill his destruction, right? Verse 16. He was still speaking when another messenger came and reported, God's fire fell from heaven. It burned the sheep and the servants and devoured them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. God's fire fell from heaven. Interesting. it wouldn't be God's fire in that sense, because we know that Satan did this. It could have been something like, well, I know somebody might say a meteor or something like that, or could have been an eruption, volcanic eruption as well. Just saying, it could have been. So natural phenomena, natural disasters Satan can use. Verse 17, the messenger was still speaking when yet another came and reported, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, made a raid on the camels, and took them away. They struck down the servants with the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. So again, we have Satan using people. Verse 18, while he was still speaking, another messenger came and reported, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. Suddenly a powerful wind, there we go again, natural disaster, weather, wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on the young people so that they died, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Okay, so then this is the famous thing, the famous scene where Job stands up, tears his robe, shaves his head, fell to the ground and worshipped, saying, naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I will leave this life. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Through all this, Job did not sin or blame God for anything. So that was at the beginning. Now again, without going through all of it, the story goes on to say that Job was not always that innocent. Okay? He wasn't always that innocent. He did blame God after a while. All right, let's go on towards the end of the book of Job. Job chapter 34. Job chapter 34. Where Elihu, or as some people would say, Elihu, was talking to Job. Okay, and Elihu says here in Job 34:5, Job declared, Job said, I am righteous. God has deprived me of justice. So Job is blaming God for being unrighteous. Basically, Job is saying that he is more righteous than God. He knows better than God. That's what it's saying, basically. And this is what happened. This is the whole thing. See, Job had this pride in him that he got to that point where he was like, I am more righteous than God. Like God's judgments here are not right. They're not good. You know, I know what's better. I know what's right. I am righteous, but God is not in what he did here. And that's basically what Job did. That was the manifestation of his pride. And people do that today as well. You know, when they read the Torah, it's like, well, it says in the Torah that if you do this, then or it says in the Torah that this is a sin, or that's a sin. Well, if it says it's a sin according to the Torah. So a lot of people, they present it as if they know better than God. Like, hey, this particular thing should not be a sin. This is not really a sin. Well, it says it's a sin in the scriptures. So it's like, do you know better than God? Are you more righteous than God? You think you're better? You think that you are more just than God is? And people do that today. It's an issue of pride. It's an issue of pride. Well, let me just skip on over to Job chapter 42. Job chapter 42 is where it all really wraps up. Now, keep in mind, there is a lot more to Job in the Septuagint than we have in the Masoretic text. Not going to get into that tonight. I actually did a video on this not all that long ago, but there are like 400 lines that are missing. Okay, and there is a lot of Job is it has been thoroughly changed. That's why there are a lot of omissions and changes to the book of Job. But in fact, in spite of all of those hundreds of lines that are missing, I think we can still get the message, the moral of the story here, and that is be humble. And again, the reason why I'm talking about humility, I think that humility is one of the most important things in our lives, in our daily interactions between, with other people. We got to be humble. And also, definitely, we got to be humble before God. One of my, if I can say, is one of my favorite passages. Micah chapter 6, verse 8. Mankind, that's God, has told you, each of you, what is good and what it is that the Lord requires of you to act justly. So this word just is actually synonymous with the word righteous. A just man in the scriptures is Sadiq, which is synonymous with righteous. So it's talking about to do what's right, to act righteously. Okay? In other words, to obey God, to love faithfulness, and to walk humbly with your God. To walk humbly with your God. So it's very, very important that we are humble, because this is one of the basic requirements. Not only that, but since we're kind of integrating this together with our talk on critical thinking, I don't think it's possible to think critically, to think properly, if you don't have humility. If you don't have humility, then you can deceive yourself and other people. So we got to keep that in mind. It's vital for us to be humble in order to think critically, clearly, and critically, and stay within the realms of reality. So Job chapter 42, the last chapter, Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do anything. See, so what happened is, now just in context here, so after Job chapter 1, Job had 3 friends that came to comfort him. Satan struck him with the disease or ailments that was horrible, very horrible. He was a pitiful sight, so bad that his friends didn't even speak for some, like it was literally it literally left them speechless for I forget how long it was. They didn't even talk until after a long time, and then finally they started talking to Job. Job's 3 friends that came to comfort him after Job chapter 1, they didn't really do a great job at comforting Job. They tried, right? So the bulk of the book of Job is the 3 friends. Job conversing with his 3 friends. That's the bulk of the book. And his 3 friends, well, they said some things that are good. They said some other things that are not so good. And it just got worse because it got bad. It got to the point where they were offending Job, and it didn't turn out really good. And then finally at the end, I think it's, what is it, Job chapter 32, when Elihu steps into the scene? Yeah. Elihu steps into the scene in Job chapter 32. Elihu's angry response. Okay. Yeah, so Job. Yeah, so Elihu was angry at the whole thing, at the way Job was talking, at the way the three friends were talking. It was just a bad thing all around. Elihu finally speaks up, and he does a really good job actually at putting Job in his place, at kind of, beating down his pride. And that's when in Job chapter 34, he's like, Job, you said that you're righteous and God is not just. God is not righteous, but you are. God's not righteous in doing what he did to you, but you are righteous. You know better than God, right? Like this, that pride. So Job chapter 42 is when God himself spoke up at the end. So after Elihu said his thing, he threw in his 2 cents, so to speak, then God himself spoke up. Then the Lord himself spoke up. So Job chapter 42, verse 1, then Job replied to the Lord. Hold on a second. It was not Job chapter 42. It was Job chapter... Hold on a second, guys. So Elihu spoke up in chapter 32, and the Lord speaks in 38. The Lord starts speaking in 38. So what God says to Job is things that really beat down his pride. Now, let's read a little bit of this, because you can see by the way that the Lord speaks here, this is what he's trying to do to Job. He's trying to pulverize the pride of Job, because that is what Job's problem was pride. So Job chapter 38 verse 1, then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. And again, think about this. You look at Elijah later on, right? When he wanted to hear from the Lord, and it said the whirlwind came through, but the Lord wasn't in the whirlwind, right? And that's when it says the still small voice of the Lord. But here the Lord is in the whirlwind. So it's not always the still small voice. Then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind, and he said, who is this who obscures my counsel with ignorant words? Get ready to answer me like a man. When I question you, you will inform me. Where were you when I established the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. So he goes on, the Lord goes on here in Job 38, 39, 40, 41, and 42, just really pounding down Job, pulverizing his pride. Finally, after all that, so the Lord says stuff like, look at my creation. You don't even know much about it, okay? Look at Leviathan. Look at the behemoth. You don't stand a chance to that. So how much more powerful I am? And it's like, where were you when I created the world? You think Job? So Job had this thing. He had this almost like Dunning-Kruger. Really, for lack of a better way of putting it, Job suffered from the Dunning-Kruger effect. There you have it. Job suffered from the Dunning-Kruger effect. There you go for some critical thinking as well. Critical thinking. Job knew this just enough about God for him to be overconfident. He knew just enough about God to be overconfident, just like a lot of people today. Yeah, the Dunning-Kruger effect. That's it's basically what Job suffered from. That's what it was. Okay, so then then Job replied to the Lord in Job 42. I know that you can do anything, and no plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this who conceals my knowledge conceals my counsel with ignorance? Surely I spoke about things I did not understand. See, now Job is starting to come down off of that Mount Stupid, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now he's starting to humble himself. he's starting to come down from that pride. So he had this issue of pride. Elihu stepped in and took a few shots at it. Then God himself stepped in and pulverized it. Now Job is like, okay, you guys, all right, I admit, I don't know about what I'm talking about. I don't know about. I'm speaking without knowledge here. Surely I spoke about things I did not understand, things too wondrous for me to know. Oh, kudos to you, Job, for being humble now. You said, listen now and I will speak. When I question you, you will inform me. I had heard reports about you, but now my eyes have seen you. There is the tipping point right there. There it is right there. There is the climax of the story right there. It's at Job chapter 42, verse 5 is when things turned around for Job. I mean, that's when the scales tipped in Job's favor, because he finally repented of his pride. He finally admitted, hey, the things I'm talking about, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I sorry, I opened my mouth and I have no understanding about the stuff I was talking about. I spoke without knowledge. Things, as Job said, too wondrous for me to know. And there are a lot of things that are too wondrous for us to know. So just because you don't understand something doesn't mean it's not true. Again, this is an issue of pride. This is the personal incredulity fallacy. It's like, that doesn't make sense to me, so therefore it's not true. Sorry. Come down from your high horse. Get off of that, swallow, get rid of that pride. No, don't fall into that personal incredulity fallacy. Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's not true. Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's not right. It could be you're the one that's wrong. It could be you don't understand it because you don't have the capacity to understand it. So let's be humble about it. Say, it's too wondrous for me to know. It's like, be like Job and say, look I spoke about things I did not understand, things too wondrous for me to know. In the footnotes, literally me and I did not. So things too wondrous for me and I did not know. But here in verse 5 is an amazing revelation. We have Job admitting that he just heard about God, that he never really had a personal experience with God. It's like, I've just heard reports about you. I've heard about you. Maybe I've read about you in the newspaper. I don't know. However, Job might have heard about God. Apparently, he heard enough about God to know about all these things. Again, the law of God, what's right and wrong, righteousness versus sin, burnt offerings, all this kind of thing. So he must have heard of, a little bit about God anyway, but he didn't have that personal relationship. He didn't have that personal experience. He did not see God face to face. I have heard reports about you, but now my eyes have seen you. Verse 6, therefore I reject my words and am sorry for them, and I am dust and ashes. So again, in the footnotes, literally says, I reject and I relent concerning dust and ashes. After the Lord had finished speaking to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends, for you have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. Now take 7 bulls and 7 rams, go to my servant Job and offer a burnt offering for yourselves. Excuse me. Then my servant Job will pray for you. I will surely accept his prayer and not deal with you as your folly deserves. For you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. So apparently, even Job's friends had an issue of pride as well, and they needed to humble themselves and go have Job pray for them, because they were kind of lording themselves over Job too. It's like, well, you wouldn't be in the place you are in right now if God was happy with you, Job. Like, God must be more happy with us than He is with you. And here it's like God's like, rebuking them too. Humble yourself. Go and get. You need to go to the guy that you need to go to Job, the guy that you were condemning, and get him to pray for you. That's how bad you are. Go to the one that you condemned, and ask that one to pray for you. Like, that's humiliating. Verse 10, after Job and had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and doubled his previous possessions. All his brothers, sisters, and former acquaintances came to him and dined with him in his house. They sympathized with him and comforted him concerning all the adversity the Lord had brought on him. Each one gave him a piece of silver and gold, a gold earring. So the Lord blessed the last part of Job's life more than the first. So he basically got double everything that he had before. He got double what he had before. And Job lived 140 years and saw his children and their children to the fourth generation. Then Job died old and full of days. Beautiful ending, beautiful ending. So this is it. I mean, yeah, like it's really, the book of Job is really all about humility. It's really what it's all about. You make it into something else, you distort it. You distort the real reason. You distort what it's really supposed to be all about. It's like putting your monitor or cell phone or any kind of device like that under a microscope. You know what you're going to see. You're going to see squares of red, green, and blue, right? You're going to see squares of red, green, and blue. It's like, look, this is just red, and this is just red, green, and blue squares. Right? So you can say that, but the truth might not. I mean, when you put too much of a microscope on anything and you don't see the full picture, the big picture for what it really is meant to be, what it really is supposed to what it's meant to convey to you, what it's meant to portray to you, then you miss the whole message. So this is what people do. They take the book of Job, they take a couple verses here and there out of it, and they miss the message of humility. It's like taking a microscope to your cell phone or to your computer screen and say, oh, look, all I see here is just red or blue or green, which that's what you will see. If you got a microscope zooming in, to the minute details of your screen. So therefore, you're not even going to see what it really is supposed to be. You're not going to really be able to interpret what it's really supposed to convey to you until you take the microscope away and look at it from a distance. That's the way it is with the book of Job as well. Take the microscope away. Stop just quoting one verse, a couple verses here, a couple verses there. Back up and look at the whole book and say, what is this book really all about? What's really the whole gist of it? What's the big picture here? The big picture is all about humility. It's about Job. He was a great guy, but then he got better because he had this little flaw in his personality that God saw, and that God sent Satan to expose it. And in the end, Job was twice as wealthy and blessed as he was in the beginning. Beautiful, beautiful story. All right. So Hannah, if you're around, if you're available, Hannah, if you can get ready to bless us with some music, that would be awesome, Hannah. Corey says, I believe Solomon is a different story because he was a monarch, so he had to collect taxes from the townsfolk, which is used to reinforce the city, or trades to keep the people alive. I'm not sure what you're trying to say here. What I was referring to earlier is Solomon's riches. He had way more riches and he didn't get his riches from taxes, by the way. He had way more riches than he really needed, or even the nation needed. But he got those riches because God blessed him abundantly, because he touched the heart of God in his prayers and in his attitude towards the Lord, right? So he prayed that God would give him wisdom to rule the people of God justly and righteously. So God's like, I like that. Yeah, I'll give you wisdom, and I'll give you what you've never asked for too. I'll give you more riches than you could shake a stick at. I'll give you more riches than anyone before you or after you. You're going to be the richest man ever. You're going to have gold coming out of your ears. Okay, you're going to have gold everywhere. And he did. More or less. Okay, he did. He had more gold than he could ever even shake a stick at, that's for sure. It was all the blessing of God. And a lot of the gold that he got too is from outside sources as well. Like, for example, the Queen of Sheba came with a great amount of gold and wealth and such, and just gave it to Solomon. Just, here you go. Here's a gift. So Solomon got these riches from various sources. That's for sure. Joshua says, I wonder if God allowing Satan to wipe out Job's children was an act of judgment, and that Job's burnt offerings amounted to naught. Yeah. I thought the same thing, Joseph. It's like, or Joshua, excuse me. I thought the same thing. It's like, I can't see it. I can't see that kind of thing happening to Job without some greater purpose behind it, or greater. It's probably, maybe his children were, and I think probably was, sinning against God, and Job knew it. His suspicions probably served him well. His intuition, if you will, served him well. It's like, well, maybe because why would he go and do burnt offerings all the time, thinking that this will appease God, or that somehow, he can get God's favor and get some kind of recompense for his children doing those things. So his children probably was doing things that they should not be doing, and this could have been part and parcel of the whole thing as well. We don't really know all the whole story. Yeah, Joshua. Yeah. Job was thinking, if I was God, I wouldn't have done this. Yeah. Yeah. If I was God, I wouldn't have done this. Yeah. It's like, I know, I would do it better than God. Don't see Hannah yet. Hannah, if you are available, if you can get ready to bless us with some music, that'd be wonderful, Hannah. Joshua says, I can't remember, did any of his friends hit the nail on the head at the root of the problem? I think not really. I think they got close to it because, at the end, the Lord rebuked them for not speaking right of him. So I think the root of the problem was really just Job. Really, Job just really needed to hear the truth about God, really, and humble himself. repent for for saying what he said. So they didn't seem to do a great job, that's for sure. Joshua says, how scary, admitting to God himself that you don't know him, but only have heard of him. I'd love to have a list of the wrong things they said about God. Wow. Yeah, I never thought about that. That would be awesome. One more thing just before I see Hannah's getting ready here. So one more thing just before I turn it over to Hannah, and that is another thing about this whole thing where it's like Job said, I have heard about you, but now my eyes see you. And this is where a lot of Christians stand today. A lot of these Christians, they go to church. They have been going to church ever since they were born. So they heard a lot about God. Well, maybe not that much either, because a lot of these churches are nothing but, positive, positive thinking kind of, just self-help kind of, classes, basically. Tickle your ears and tell you how much God loves you and sends you on your way. Just false teachings, in my opinion. But, a lot of people, they don't realize that they don't know God personally. They think they do. But they don't realize that they don't. They don't realize that what they know about God is just what they've heard about him rather than knowing him experientially. Experiential knowledge. I said about this like before, you could be talking about, let's say, for example, you can talk about the king of who knows what, the king of Jordan, let's just say. Okay, you can be talking about the king of Jordan. You can read a lot of books about the king of Jordan. You can say, I know the king of Jordan. Well, go knock on his door. Do you really know him? If you know him, then he would definitely know you. Like if you really have that relationship, I know him, like I know my best friend, I know my spouse or whatever the case is. If you really know him, then he will definitely know you, and then you should be able to go and knock on his door, and he would welcome you with open arms. Or you could say this, I know the king of Jordan. Yeah, do you know the king of Jordan? Yeah, I know him. It's like you read a lot about him, you've heard a lot about him, but then if he were to come to your door, and if he were to open the door and to walk in, that would be like a totally different thing. And be like, wait a second, I didn't really know him, I just knew about him. And that's how Job was too. And that's how a lot of people are too with God. They don't really know God. Even people that go to church, I think a few of them do, just a very small fraction of percentage do, but most of them don't. They think they do because they've been going to church for a long time. But they don't know God. They don't know God. And if you were to tell them that, then they would be offended and angry because of their pride. Again, their pride, just like Job. And so the best thing that could ever happen to them would be an Elihu coming to them and rebuking them harshly. The best thing that could ever happen to them would be an Elihu coming to them telling them the truth, God coming to them and shattering their pride. That would be the best thing that would ever happen to them. All right. So, anyways, Hannah is about ready to play, and so Hannah's going to bless us with some spontaneous music here. Then we're going to come back and read a little bit of Josephus, and that'll be it for the night. So, be blessed as Hannah plays some music. Here she is. All right, I'm back. I'm back. The audio was off here. It was on mute. Okay. Well, anyways, thank you, Hannah, for blessing us. That was an awesome piece there that you played. Thank you for always blessing us with your talent. That is amazing, amazing, amazing. All right. So we're on Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, Book 5, Chapter 3. So I'm going to read this whole chapter. It's a small chapter, chapter 3, and we'll see what Josephus here has to say. Here is chapter 3. It says how the Israelites, after this misfortune, grew wicked and served the Assyrians, and how God delivered them by Othniel, who ruled over the 40 years. Paragraph 1. Now it happened that the tribe of Dan suffered in like manner with the tribe of Benjamin, and it came to do so on the occasion following. When the Israelites had already left off the exercise of their arms for war, and were intent upon their husbandry, the Canaanites despised them, and brought together an army, not because they expected to suffer by them, but because they had a mind to have a sure prospect of treating the Hebrews ill when they pleased, and might thereby for the time to come dwell in their own cities the more securely. They prepared therefore their chariots, and gathered their soldiery together. Their cities also combined together, and drew over to them Ashkelon and Ekron, which were within the tribe of Judah, and many more of those that lay in the plain. They also forced the Danites to fly into the mountainous country, and left them not the least portion of the plain country to set their foot on. Since then, these Danites were not able to fight them, and had not land enough to sustain them. They sent 5 of their men into the midland country to seek for a land to which they might remove their habitation. So these men went as far as the neighborhood of Mount Libanus and the fountains of the lesser Jordan, at the great plain of Sidon, a day's journey from the city. When they had taken a view of the land and found it to be good and exceeding fruitful, they acquainted their tribe with it, whereupon they made an expedition with the army, and built there the city Dan, for the same name with the son of Jacob, and of the same name with their own tribe. The Israelites grew so indolent and unready of taking pains, that misfortunes came heavier upon them, which also proceeded in part from their contempt of the divine worship. For when they had once fallen off from the regularity of their political government, they indulged themselves further in living according to their own pleasure and according to their own will, till they were full of evil doings that were common among the Canaanites. God therefore was angry with them, and they lost that their happy state, which they had obtained by innumerable labors, by their luxury. For when Cushan, king of the Assyrians, had made war against them, they lost many of their soldiers in the battle, and when they were besieged, they were taken by force. Nay, there were some who out of fear voluntarily submitted to him, and though the tribute laid upon them was more than they could bear, yet did they pay it, and underwent all sort of oppression for 8 years, after which time they were freed from them in the following manner. There was one whose name was Othniel, the son of Kenaz, of the tribe of Judah, an active man and of great courage. He had an admonition from God not to overlook the Israelites in such a distress as they were now in, but to endeavor boldly to gain them their liberty. So when he had procured some to assist him in this dangerous undertaking, and few they were who, either out of shame at their present circumstances or out of a desire of changing them, could be prevailed on to assist him. He first of all destroyed that garrison which Cushan had set over them, but when it was perceived that he had not failed in his first attempt, more of the people came to his assistance, so they joined battle with the Assyrians and drove them entirely before them and compelled them to pass over the Euphrates. Hereupon Othniel, who had given such proofs of his valor, received from the multitude authority to judge the people, and when he had ruled over them 40 years, he died. Okay, so that concludes our reading for tonight. Okay, guys, so that's it for tonight. If you haven't already, please leave a like, follow, and subscribe if you haven't already. And we will do this again tomorrow night, Lord willing. We do this every night, 7 days a week, Sunday through Friday. That's Sunday through Friday, 6 days, 7 p.m. Eastern, and every Saturday would be 2 p.m. Eastern. So that means tomorrow, being Saturday, we're going to start at 2 p.m. instead of 7 p.m. 2 p.m. instead of 7 p.m. tomorrow. Anyways, guys, that's awesome. Thanks for your questions, your comments. You guys are awesome. You guys are world changers. I'll see you again tomorrow. Until then, as always, I pray the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you, lift up his countenance upon you, and give you wonderful, wonderful